The sun rose slowly over the jagged ridges of Kunar province, painting the valley in shades of orange and ochre. Dust hung in the air, a fine haze that smelled faintly of earth and smoke. Carried from distant firefights no one in this remote corner of Afghanistan had witnessed but could feel. Sergeant Emily Carter adjusted the strap of her medpack, its contents meticulously organized for injuries ranging from burns to bullet wounds. She moved with deliberate calm, her brown eyes scanning the surrounding ridges, watching shadows shift across the rocks, noting every movement. To anyone else, she seemed quiet, unassuming, almost fragile. But beneath that calm exterior was a steel resolve that had carried her through years of grueling military, medical training, and countless deployments. Emily's path to becoming a combat medic had been unconventional. The daughter of a small-town nurse, she had grown up learning to patch scraped knees and comfort frightened children. She had been expected to follow in her mother's footsteps, to heal, to nurture, to stay safe. But the pull of service had been too strong. The army offered not only purpose, but a chance to protect others, to make life and death decisions when it mattered most. She thrived in the chaos of triage tents and makeshift hospitals, where calm hands and a sharp mind could make the difference between life and death. Yet, in the eyes of her fellow soldiers, she was often underestimated. She didn't throw herself into combat with bravado. She didn't bark orders or flaunt courage. She simply moved quietly, efficiently, and was always watching, always preparing. Captain Daniel Reeves, her platoon commander, understood her in ways few did. He had led his men through countless skirmishes and ambushes, relying on strategy and instinct rather than brute force. Reeves respected soldiers who thought ahead, who observed details others missed. He had seen Emily in action during a previous engagement when she had stabilized 3 soldiers simultaneously, calmly coordinating the evacuation of a wounded man while under fire. From that moment, he had trusted her with his life, a trust she never took lightly. He often referred to her quietly in briefings as our quiet shield, a nod to the invisible armor she provided not through gunfire, but through her steady presence and skill. Today, they faced another mission, a patrol through a narrow mountain pass, rumored to be a Taliban stronghold. The soldiers moved in formation, the lead Humvee kicking up dust as it crept along the rocky trail. Emily rode in the middle vehicle, medpack secured tightly across her chest, her hand occasionally brushing the supplies within. She could feel the tension in the unit, the nervous energy that comes before stepping into a place where ambushes are likely. The men around her joked, trying to lighten the mood, but their laughter was brittle, shaky, betraying their anxiety. Emily simply listened, mentally cataloging each soldier's behavior, each sign of stress, each faltering heartbeat. The valley ahead was deceptively quiet. No children played near the sparse dwellings that dotted the mountainsides. No farmers tended to their fields. Even the animals were absent. It was the kind of silence that whispers danger, a silence that had claimed lives before. Emily's pulse quickened, though her exterior remained calm. She had learned early in her deployments to separate emotion from action. Fear was natural. Letting it guide your decisions was deadly. Reeves raised his hand, signaling a halt. The convoy stopped abruptly, tires crunching gravel. He scanned the ridgelines with practiced eyes, noting the lack of movement. He could feel the tension in the soldiers beside him. "Something's not right," he muttered, almost to himself, but loud enough for Emily to hear. She nodded slightly, adjusting her medpack as if preparing for a long trek, though she knew this was no ordinary patrol. Emily's training kicked in. Her eyes flitted from one shadow to another. The rocks, the sparse trees, the ruins of small mud-brick homes, all became part of a mental map of potential threats. She noticed subtle changes in the wind, the way dust moved across the ground, and the faintest glint of sunlight on metal far above on the ridge. Her hands rested lightly on the med pack, ready to pull out supplies or aid a fallen comrade. Her mind calculated scenarios: sniper fire from the cliffs, a planted IED, an ambush from the ruins. Every possibility had a plan. The soldiers laughed nervously again, breaking the tension for a moment. Private Jenkins, a young recruit with hands shaking under his gloves, attempted a joke about Reeves' obsession with keeping his uniform clean. The humor landed awkwardly, but it worked, a brief reprieve before the storm. Emily allowed herself a small, fleeting smile, and then it vanished. She focused on the silent warnings in the valley. Something was coming. Reeves moved forward to scout the path, hand resting on the stock of his rifle. Emily followed in the convoy, her eyes never leaving the surrounding heights. The mountains seemed to lean in closer, cradling the narrow pass in shadows. She thought of her mother back home, how she had always taught her that courage isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steady. It's doing what must be done, even when fear claws at your chest. She inhaled, centering herself. Today, that quiet courage would be tested like never before. As the lead Humvee rounded a bend, a glint flashed across the rocks above. Quick, subtle, almost easy to miss. Emily froze for a fraction of a second, and processed the movement. Her heart rate increased, her muscles tensing instinctively. She reached for the radio, intending to warn Reeves, but before she could speak, the valley erupted. A deafening explosion shattered the morning calm, sending rocks, dust, and debris into the air. The front Humvee lurched violently, flames licking its side, and the sound of gunfire tore through the valley. Men shouted over the chaos, their voices mixing with screams and the rattle of automatic fire. Emily's training took over. She dove behind a low wall of rubble, hands steady, assessing injuries as her eyes flicked across the battlefield. Time slowed in those first seconds, measured only by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Soldiers fell, bullets ricocheted, and screams pierced the dusty air. Emily's focus narrowed. Her world reduced to what was directly in front of her. Wounded men, the wounded captain, and the survival of those she could reach. She pulled her med kit from her back, slinging it to her front, and began moving through the chaos with methodical precision, as though guided by instinct alone. Even in that moment, she noted details others might miss: the trajectory of incoming fire, the position of cover, the placement of each soldier. She was the calm in the storm, the silent force that had always been present, but now would be impossible to ignore. Emily knew that in a matter of minutes, the patrol could either be annihilated or survive. And survival might very well depend on her. Her hands, steady and sure, began tending to the first soldier she reached. She worked quickly, cleaning a wound, applying a tourniquet, whispering reassurances she barely felt herself. The chaos continued around her, but Emily moved with a purpose and focus that drew even the panicked soldiers' attention. They looked at her not as the quiet medic anymore, but as something else, someone capable of standing as a lifeline amid the hell of battle. Above it all, unseen but unmistakable, Emily's eyes caught a flicker of movement higher up the ridge. The realization hit her like a cold wind. This was no random attack. It was calculated. The enemy had been waiting, watching, planning. And now there was no turning back. Emily's pulse was steady, her mind clear. She had trained for this, for the chaos, for the blood, for the moments when life and death hung in balance. But even in the controlled calm she projected, a small, quiet fear whispered to her. Today would be the day she would find out whether courage alone could hold back the storm, and whether the medic, always the healer, could survive a world built on bullets and fire. The valley waited in silence just for a heartbeat. Then it erupted, and Emily Carter, the quiet medic, stepped fully into her destiny. The convoy moved cautiously, tires grinding over the jagged rocks of Kunar Valley. Dust swirled around the Humvees, catching the early sun in a haze of orange and gold. Every soldier felt the oppressive silence of the valley, a quiet that carried its own threat. Emily Carter rode in the middle vehicle, her med pack resting against her chest like a shield. Her eyes scanned the ridges, the rocky outcrops, the sparse ruins of mud brick homes that clung precariously to the slopes. Each shadow could conceal a sniper. Each gust of wind could signal an unseen threat. Her hands remained near her kit, fingers brushing lightly over bandages and tourniquets, ready for any emergency. Captain Daniel Reeves sat in the lead Humvee, eyes trained on the path ahead. His brow furrowed as he noticed the unnatural stillness. No children laughed from the villages. No shepherds guided flocks down the slopes. Even the goats, usually scattered across the crags, were absent. The absence of life screamed danger more than any sound ever could. Reeves raised a hand to signal a halt. The convoy stopped, tires crunching against gravel, sending up clouds of dust that hung in the still morning air. The soldiers' nervous laughter died quickly, replaced by a tense awareness that this valley had been waiting for them. Emily's pulse quickened as she observed the terrain. The rocks above, perfect vantage points for an ambush. She noticed small details, the slight movement of dust, the glint of sunlight off what could be metal, and the way the wind shifted oddly around the ridges. She had learned that battle often hinged on noticing what others missed. As the unit's medic, she was trained to save lives, but she had also been trained to anticipate danger. She moved through these mental maps with precision, preparing for every possibility. Sniper fire, improvised explosives, a sudden rush from the ridges. Private Jenkins, a young recruit with a perpetual nervous energy, broke the silence with an awkward joke about the captain's obsession with uniform regulations. The humor landed poorly, but for a moment it pierced the tension, and Emily allowed herself a small smile. The soldiers chuckled uneasily, though everyone knew it was a fragile shield against the fear building in their chests. Emily's smile faded as quickly as it appeared. She shifted her weight, resting lightly on her med pack, and continued scanning the valley. Danger was coming. She could feel it. The convoy crested a small rise, and Emily's eyes caught a glint of metal on the rocks far above. She squinted, tracking the light. It was subtle, almost invisible, if one weren't looking carefully. Her hand instinctively moved toward the radio to warn Reeves, but before she could speak, the valley erupted. A deafening explosion tore through the lead Humvee. The blast sent metal and dust flying, and the earth beneath their feet seemed to convulse. Soldiers screamed, some thrown from vehicles, others crouching for cover. Bullets rained from the ridges above, the sharp cracks echoing off the mountains like thunder. Emily dove behind a ruined wall, her body instinctively pressing close to the ground. Her med pack landed beside her with a heavy thud, and she immediately began scanning for injuries. The initial shock of the attack passed in seconds, replaced by a precise awareness that came from years of training. Emily's gaze swept the battlefield, noting the fallen, the injured, and the positions of her fellow soldiers. Captain Reeves rose from the lead Humvee, shouting orders and trying to establish a defensive line. A sniper's round struck near him, throwing him to the ground, and Emily's heart leapt. She assessed the distance, the trajectory, and calculated the risks. Every second counted. Emily's legs moved before her brain caught up. She sprinted across open ground, ignoring the bullets that whipped past her. Each movement was precise, calculated, as she reached a wounded private sprawled across the dirt. She applied pressure to his chest wound, whispering encouragements, even as her own adrenaline surged. Around her, the battle raged, but she was focused, a calm in the storm. Her eyes flicked to the ridges, noting enemy positions, the sway of bush that marked potential shooters, the faint glint of gun metal reflecting the sun. The rest of the platoon scrambled for cover, but Emily's movements drew attention. Soldiers instinctively followed her lead, forming a defensive perimeter around her as she worked on the wounded. Private Daniels, a veteran who had seen more combat than most, caught her eye. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of her leadership under fire. Emily's calm demeanor had shifted something in the others. Even in the face of chaos, there was order. Bullets tore through the air. Smoke and dust created a surreal haze that blurred reality, making the battle feel dreamlike, yet terrifyingly immediate. Emily's hands worked swiftly, binding wounds, securing tourniquets, and checking vitals. Every second brought new threats, but she moved methodically, as though dancing on the edge of a knife. The valley seemed endless, each ridge hiding another enemy, each crag another ambush point. Yet she did not falter. Then, above the din of gunfire, she saw it. Captain Reeves, moving desperately, trying to direct the platoon while blood soaked his uniform. A sniper's bullet had grazed him, and he was struggling to stay upright. Emily froze for a heartbeat, then made her choice. She would reach him, no matter the risk. She darted across open ground, each step measured, heart hammering, muscles taut. She reached him just as he collapsed fully, gripping him with every ounce of strength she had. She dragged him behind a ruined wall, her own uniform torn, dirt and dust coating her face and arms. Reeves groaned, blood trickling from a wound that had been critical. Emily immediately assessed him, checking airway, pulse, and the extent of his injuries. She whispered instructions to the nearby soldiers, directing them to provide cover and help evacuate the wounded. Her voice, calm and commanding despite the chaos, anchored the soldiers, giving them a focus amidst the madness. Minutes passed like hours. The valley remained a theater of destruction, bullets ricocheting, smoke thickening, the scent of gunpowder and blood hanging in the air. Emily worked tirelessly, her hands steady, her mind sharp. She realized then the full scale of what was happening. This ambush had been planned, calculated, meant to decimate their unit. But she refused to let fear control her actions. Her priority was clear: keep the captain alive, protect the soldiers, and hold the line until reinforcements arrived. Around her, the soldiers began responding, inspired by her composure. They moved strategically, providing suppressive fire, retreating and advancing as Emily directed. She felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders, but she bore it with resolve. Each soldier she saved, each action she took, was a step toward survival. And then, amidst the chaos, she caught sight of the enemy positions with remarkable clarity. A sniper perched high above, a small group advancing from the left ridge. Every movement was calculated in her mind, every possible outcome considered. Emily Carter, the quiet medic, had transformed from observer to orchestrator. Her training, instincts, and courage merged into a singular force. She had stepped fully into the storm, aware that survival depended not just on her skill, but on her ability to inspire those around her. The valley had been waiting for blood, but it had underestimated the resolve of one woman who refused to let it take everything she loved. And as the first seconds of the firefight stretched into minutes, Emily knew one truth: this was only the beginning. The valley was alive with danger, and she would face it with calm, precision, and courage. Whatever came next, she was ready, the quiet medic who would soon be known for something far greater than her gentle hands. The first explosions had barely settled when the valley erupted into unrelenting chaos. Shards of rock, clouds of dust, and the sharp smell of gunpowder filled the air. The lead Humvee had been ripped apart, metal twisted and smoke curling into the sky. The sound of shattering glass and ricocheting bullets created a deafening roar. Soldiers screamed, some thrown to the rocky ground, others firing wildly, trying to make sense of the sudden attack. Emily Carter's training kicked in instinctively. Every movement was precise, every thought sharp. As she dove behind a crumbled wall, the med pack thudding against her chest, she froze for the briefest moment, absorbing the chaos. Her eyes darted across the battlefield, noting the positions of her platoon, the locations of the injured, and the trajectories of enemy fire. Captain Daniel Reeves had leaped from the lead vehicle, shouting orders, directing the soldiers with the authority that had earned him their respect. Emily caught a glimpse of him through the dust, moving with determination that bordered on recklessness. Then a sniper's round tore through the air, striking Reeves in the chest. His cry cut through the cacophony. Emily's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to move, to act. Panic could kill here. Precision could save lives. She sprinted across open ground, ignoring bullets that cut the air around her, the hum of death and chaos a constant companion. Every step was calculated. Her training allowed her to move like a shadow, low and fast, toward her wounded commander. She reached him, gripping him under the arms and dragging him behind a nearby crumbling wall, just as another round chipped stone, where she had been standing a heartbeat before. Reeves groaned, blood staining his uniform. Emily knelt beside him, hands moving with the efficiency of years of training. She checked his airway, stemmed the bleeding from his chest, and applied a tourniquet to a wound on his arm. Her mind raced through the procedures she had drilled until they were second nature, but the surrounding chaos demanded more. She had to stabilize him enough to survive the firefight, but she also had to assess her surroundings. The valley had become a maze of smoke, fire, and debris. Dust hung thick in the air, reducing visibility to mere meters. The sound of gunfire echoed off the ridges, mingling with screams and the shriek of shrapnel. Soldiers moved erratically, seeking cover behind rocks and abandoned vehicles, some returning fire, others crouched over the wounded. Emily's eyes scanned constantly, noting enemy positions, spotting a sniper peeking from a jagged outcrop, another group advancing from the left ridge. Every move she made was informed by strategy. She could not afford mistakes. Nearby, Private Daniels had been pinned behind a destroyed wall. He caught Emily's eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement that he would cover her as she worked. Emily's presence seemed to anchor the platoon. The calm precision of her actions offered a fragile sense of stability amidst the storm. She moved between the injured, applying pressure, whispering reassurances, and coordinating medevac priorities. Time seemed distorted, the seconds stretching, compressing, yet each action remained deliberate. Then she noticed it, the scope of the ambush. Insurgents had planned for maximum destruction. The valley's natural curves funneled the convoy directly into their kill zone. Rockets, small arms, and sniper fire converged on the platoon from multiple angles. Emily realized that survival depended not just on tending to the wounded, but on holding the position until reinforcements could arrive. She issued clear, concise orders to nearby soldiers, telling them where to focus suppressive fire and where to cover retreating comrades. Captain Reeves, still groaning in pain, tried to rise. Emily grabbed him, pressing him back against the crumbled wall. "Stay down, sir. You're not moving until I say so," she snapped. Her voice cut through the battlefield like a beacon. The soldiers nearest her responded, moving with new coordination, inspired by the medic who had stepped fearlessly into the fire. Emily's hands worked methodically on the wounded, but her mind was alive with calculations. Each movement of the enemy, each change in the wind, each echo off the valley walls informed her strategy. She noticed a group of insurgents attempting to flank the left ridge. She grabbed a radio, her voice steady, calling out coordinates for those with rifles to fire. The soldiers obeyed, suppressing the enemy advance, buying precious seconds. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one a lifetime in which survival teetered on a knife's edge. Emily assessed every soldier she could see, checking vitals, cleaning wounds, and applying pressure where needed. She whispered words of encouragement that she didn't fully feel herself, but the effect on the wounded and frightened soldiers was immediate. Her calm presence became a lifeline, and in the chaos, they followed her instinctively. Her eyes flicked back to Captain Reeves. The sniper had repositioned, and his scope glinted ominously. Emily realized then that she had to make a decision. The medic's role was to heal, not to fight, but if the enemy struck the commander, the entire unit could be destroyed. Her mind raced through training exercises and combat drills. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and prepared for the impossible: to defend, to protect, to fire. Before she could make a move, another soldier screamed as a rocket slammed near their position. Shrapnel flew, tearing into rocks and uniforms alike. Emily barely flinched, her body moving instinctively to shield those nearby. She rolled forward, closing the gap between her and the enemy line, assessing angles and planning the next step. Every muscle, every nerve was attuned to survival, every thought sharpened by necessity. Then, a moment of clarity. The M4 lying near Captain Reeves. Emily glanced at it, knowing instinctively that if she didn't act, the commander, and perhaps the platoon, could fall. She hesitated as her medic's creed echoed in her mind: to save, not to kill. But survival demanded more than adherence to rules. It demanded action. Her fingers closed around the rifle, its weight unfamiliar yet empowering. She raised it cautiously, scanning for targets, preparing to defend not just one life, but many. Emily fired. Each shot was deliberate, precise, a controlled response in the midst of chaos. Her aim, refined through extra hours of marksmanship training she had undertaken quietly, struck true. Insurgents fell back, surprised by the sudden accuracy of the medic-turned-defender. Her voice cut through the noise, directing soldiers, calling out positions, coordinating counterattacks. The tide of battle, however slowly, began to shift. Minutes later, the first glimmer of hope appeared. Suppressive fire from Emily and the remaining soldiers had stabilized part of the valley. Enemy movements became cautious. The ambush's initial ferocity was tempered by the unexpected resilience of the platoon. Emily, sweat and dust streaking her face, glanced at the wounded commander. He was breathing, eyes wide with a mixture of pain and disbelief. She had bought them both time that might mean survival. In that hellish valley, amidst smoke, blood, and chaos, Emily Carter became more than a medic. She became the anchor, the center around which the platoon rallied. Her quiet courage, her training, her precision, and her resolve had transformed the battlefield into something manageable, something survivable. And even as the echoes of gunfire continued, she knew one truth: the ambush had not broken them, because she would not let it. As Emily crouched beside Captain Reeves, her chest heaving and eyes scanning for the next threat, she realized the valley was alive with danger, but so was she. And in that moment, amidst the terror and the smoke, a quiet hero emerged, ready to face whatever came next. The valley was a storm of dust, smoke, and the relentless rattle of bullets. Emily Carter crouched behind the crumbled wall, chest heaving, eyes scanning the battlefield as Captain Daniel Reeves groaned beside her. The initial shock of the ambush had faded, replaced by a grim clarity. The unit was pinned, the enemy organized, and their survival uncertain. Every second counted. Every choice could mean life or death. Emily's hands, still trembling slightly from adrenaline, hovered over her med pack, applying pressure to the captain's chest wound, stabilizing him as best she could. Yet even as she worked, a gnawing realization settled over her. Medicine alone would not save them today. Reeves' breath was ragged, sweat streaking the blood on his face. His eyes, wide with pain and disbelief, met hers. He tried to rise, to bark orders, but a spasm of agony forced him back against the rubble. Emily's heart clenched. The medic's code was simple: heal, protect, preserve life. And yet, in this moment, healing was insufficient. The enemy pressed relentlessly, advancing from ridges and rocky outcrops, while suppressive fire pinned down the remaining soldiers. Survival demanded a choice, one Emily had never imagined she would make. Her gaze fell on the M4 rifle lying near Reeves' outstretched hand. A weighty instrument of destruction, it gleamed faintly through the dust, a tool of survival dangling within reach. Emily hesitated, the conflict between her role and the necessity of the moment gnawing at her. She had been trained to save lives, not take them. She was a medic, not a soldier. Yet, the reality of the valley pressed down on her like a living thing. Her comrades depended on her, and if she did not act, they could all die. A sharp crack of gunfire echoed from the left ridge. A young private screamed as a bullet tore through his cover. Emily flinched, but did not move back. The choice crystallized in her mind. The rifle was not a weapon of aggression in this moment. It was a lifeline. To pick it up was not to forsake her oath as a medic. It was to fulfill it in the only way that could keep life alive. She inhaled, centering herself, every instinct honed by years of training kicking into place. She would act. She had to act. Her hands closed around the rifle. The weight was unfamiliar, heavy, yet oddly reassuring. She raised it cautiously, scanning the ridges, her mind calculating trajectories, angles, and threats. Every second was a decision, every movement a choice between safety and exposure. Her pulse pounded, but her hands were steady. The rifle became an extension of herself, an instrument of protection rather than destruction, a bridge between life and death. Emily fired her first shot, a controlled burst that found its mark on an insurgent peeking from behind a rock. The enemy faltered, and for a fleeting moment, a breath of hope entered the valley. Her movements were deliberate, precise, the instincts of a soldier emerging naturally, almost as if she had always known how to wield the weapon. Yet beneath the precision lay a deeper purpose: to protect, to shield, to save lives, not to kill recklessly. The enemy regrouped, but the platoon, inspired by Emily's boldness, found a renewed rhythm. Soldiers moved strategically, returning fire with coordinated effort, following her direction as she called out targets, flanking maneuvers, and positions of cover. Emily became the pivot around which the defense spun. Her quiet courage transformed into active command, and the soldiers, once scattered and panicked, began to regain their footing. The valley's oppressive weight seemed to shift, responding to her resolve. Amid the chaos, Emily kept one eye on Captain Reeves. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive, a testament to her skill and quick action. She had stabilized him enough to survive the immediate threat, yet she knew the firefight could turn at any moment. The insurgents were organized, relentless, and numerous. Every shot she took was measured, every movement calculated. She became a singular force, a bridge between chaos and control, wielding the rifle not with aggression, but with protective precision. The minutes stretched into eternity. Smoke, dust, and the stench of gunpowder mingled with the cries of wounded soldiers. Emily moved from one firing position to another, suppressing enemy fire while coordinating care for the injured. She called out clear, concise instructions: where to fire, where to take cover, who needed assistance. Her voice, steady amid the storm, anchored the soldiers. They began to respond with newfound determination, following her cues as though she were a commander rather than a medic. Then, a sniper on the ridge attempted another shot, aiming directly at Reeves. Emily reacted instinctively, raising the rifle and taking a precise shot that neutralized the threat. The platoon froze for a heartbeat, then slowly began to advance, pushing back the enemy with coordinated volleys. Emily's calm, calculated presence turned the tide of the battle, proving that courage and skill could overcome fear and chaos. Her heart still pounded, but her mind remained clear, focused entirely on keeping her comrades alive. Emily caught sight of a small group of insurgents attempting to flank from the right. She called out coordinates, instructing the remaining soldiers to cover the approach. They obeyed instantly, their movements precise and deliberate, bolstered by the confidence Emily inspired. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the ambush began, the platoon had gained an edge. The valley, once an overwhelming force of danger, was beginning to yield to human determination. Her thoughts flickered briefly to her role as a medic. She had taken a rifle in her hands, acted in defiance of her own expectations, and yet, in doing so, she had preserved life rather than destroyed it. The paradox was not lost on her. Courage was not a single act. It was a series of decisions made under impossible pressure. And Emily Carter had chosen to act when it mattered most. Hours felt like minutes as the firefight raged. Each shot fired a testament to her training, skill, and resolve. Emily moved with grace and precision, covering the wounded, directing fire, and keeping the platoon cohesive. Captain Reeves, stabilized and conscious, watched her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had not only saved his life, but had preserved the lives of those around her, turning a moment of near despair into a defensive stronghold. Finally, the enemy began to falter, their advance slowed and disorganized. Emily remained vigilant, eyes scanning every ridge and outcrop, ready for the next threat. She realized the truth of what she had done. She had crossed a line that few medics ever did, wielding the rifle not out of aggression, but necessity, and in doing so, she had transformed the battle into a fight they could survive. The valley remained dangerous, the echoes of gunfire still lingering, but Emily Carter, the quiet medic, had made her choice. She had chosen action over hesitation, courage over fear, and life over despair. And in that choice, she began a transformation that would define her, that would inspire her platoon, and that would etch her name into the annals of battlefield legend. The valley, once a theater of chaos and despair, began to respond to Emily Carter's unwavering presence. Bullets whizzed past her ears, dust and debris clouding her vision, but she remained focused, her mind a finely tuned instrument of survival. The M4 in her hands felt heavy yet natural, an extension of her resolve. Each controlled burst struck enemy positions with uncanny precision. She had trained as a medic, but the countless hours she had secretly spent on marksmanship were now paying off in the most intense crucible imaginable. Nearby soldiers followed her lead, coordinating suppressive fire and advancing strategically. Emily's calm, commanding voice cut through the cacophony of the battlefield, issuing orders that were clear, concise, and effective. "Left flank, cover that ridge," she shouted, her eyes tracking every subtle movement of the enemy. "Suppressing fire, keep them pinned." Her directions were instinctual, yet calculated, rooted in both battlefield experience and her natural ability to read people and terrain. Panic, which had gripped the platoon moments before, began to fade. Captain Daniel Reeves, still wounded but alive, watched in stunned admiration. Emily had not only stabilized him medically, but now led the unit through the ambush. He could barely comprehend what he was seeing, the quiet medic, once overlooked and underestimated, now directing the course of a firefight with a precision and courage that rivaled the most seasoned combat veterans. Every movement she made was purposeful. Every shot was deliberate. She had become the pivot point around which the unit rallied. Emily's eyes scanned the ridges, noting the enemy's attempts to regroup. A sniper had taken cover behind a jagged outcrop, aiming at the Humvees, while a small squad tried to flank from the left. She adjusted her position slightly, raising the rifle and taking aim at the sniper. The shot rang out, precise and controlled, and the enemy fell, momentarily silencing one of the deadliest threats. Her actions inspired those around her. Soldiers moved with renewed confidence, following her cues, turning what had been a desperate struggle into a coordinated defense. Her hands, still steady from hours of training and experience, worked seamlessly. She transitioned between providing covering fire and checking on wounded soldiers nearby. Private Daniels, who had been frozen with fear moments before, moved beside her to suppress fire from the flanking enemy squad. Emily called out adjustments, her voice calm but firm. Every word, every gesture, provided structure amidst the chaos. The platoon, once scattered and uncertain, began to push back with renewed vigor. Emily's mind raced through tactical considerations. The insurgents were skilled and organized, but their momentum had been broken. Every shot she fired, every command she issued, further tilted the balance. She repositioned herself repeatedly, using the valley's rocks and crags as cover, while maintaining a clear line of sight on enemy positions. Bullets kicked up dust around her, but she did not flinch. Her training as a medic had taught her to remain composed under pressure, and now that composure became her greatest weapon. As the enemy faltered, Emily directed her fellow soldiers to advance carefully, covering each other's movement. She remained vigilant, scanning the ridges for any signs of ambush. The young private who had panicked earlier now followed her orders without hesitation, his confidence restored by her example. Emily's presence had transformed not only the battle, but the morale of the platoon. They were no longer reacting in fear. They were acting with precision, guided by her steady hand. Moments later, Emily noticed another squad of insurgents attempting to gain a higher vantage point on the right ridge. She quickly called out suppressive fire coordinates, instructing soldiers to focus on specific targets. The shots rang true, and the enemy hesitated, unsure how to respond to the sudden counterattack. Emily seized the opportunity, moving closer to Reeves while still keeping the enemy pinned. Her ability to balance offense and defense was remarkable, blending her medic's instinct for protection with a newfound aptitude for combat leadership. The battlefield shifted in a matter of minutes. The enemy's organized advance was now fragmented and chaotic. Soldiers who had moments ago crouched in fear now pressed forward, coordinated by Emily's clear directives. She moved from position to position, her rifle ready, eyes sharp, every action deliberate. The valley that had seemed like a death trap began to feel manageable. She was not only surviving, she was creating opportunities for her unit to survive and regain control. Reeves, though still weak and wounded, called out to Emily. "Doc, I don't know how you're doing this," he said, his voice hoarse. Emily glanced at him briefly, giving a small nod, her focus never wavering. "We hold this position," she replied calmly, "and we get everyone out alive. That's all that matters." Her words were simple, yet carried a weight that inspired the soldiers around her. They understood the unspoken truth. Emily Carter was their anchor, their shield, and if necessary, their sword. Hours seemed to stretch as the firefight continued. Emily's breaths were measured, her movements precise. She engaged the enemy at strategic moments, always calculating risk versus reward. Her understanding of the terrain, combined with her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, allowed her to predict enemy movements and coordinate the platoon's response effectively. Every soldier who survived the ambush owed a silent debt to her focus and courage. Finally, the tide began to fully turn. The enemy, now disorganized and demoralized, began to retreat from the valley's center. Their attempts to flank and gain superior positions had been thwarted repeatedly by Emily's precise instructions and accurate fire. The platoon, guided by her calm authority, began to push forward, reclaiming lost ground inch by inch. Emily remained at the forefront, rifle ready, eyes scanning every ridge, ensuring no surprise attack could undo their progress. For the first time since the ambush began, a glimmer of hope entered the valley. The initial shock and fear that had gripped the platoon were replaced by renewed confidence and determination. Emily's presence had transformed a near-fatal ambush into a fight that could be survived. She had turned chaos into order, fear into focus, and despair into action. Her actions were not just heroic. They were legendary in their precision, courage, and impact. Emily caught a momentary glance of Captain Reeves, who gave her a subtle nod, his eyes filled with awe. She had not only saved his life, but had preserved the fighting capability of the entire platoon. Every decision, every movement, every shot had contributed to the reversal of a battle that had seemed lost. The valley, once a symbol of imminent death, now reflected the triumph of human will and courage. As the enemy began a hesitant retreat, Emily lowered her rifle slightly, but did not relax completely. She knew the battle was not yet over. The valley still held hidden threats. Yet, in this moment, she allowed herself a brief recognition of what she had accomplished. The quiet medic had become the pivot point of the battle, the leader who turned despair into hope, and the shield that had kept her comrades alive. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley with a harsh, unforgiving light. Smoke and dust lingered, painting the landscape in shades of gray and orange. Emily Carter, still crouched behind the crumbled wall, looked across the battlefield. Wounded soldiers were being tended to, enemy fire had slowed, and the platoon had regained its footing. She allowed herself a deep breath, steadying her racing heart, knowing that her actions had changed the course of the fight. In that moment, Emily realized the truth of her transformation. She was no longer merely a medic. She was a protector, a strategist, and a hero in the truest sense. Her courage, skill, and presence had not only turned the tide of battle, but had preserved the lives of everyone in the valley. The legend of Emily Carter, the quiet medic who became a warrior, had begun to take shape. The valley had fallen eerily silent, save for the occasional crack of a distant shot and the hiss of dust settling over the battlefield. Smoke curled from the wreckage of destroyed Humvees, staining the air with the acrid scent of gunpowder and burnt rubber. Emily Carter crouched behind the same crumbled wall that had shielded her throughout the ambush, chest heaving, sweat and grime streaking her face. Her M4 lay within reach, though the immediate danger had lessened. For a moment, she allowed herself to exhale, though the weariness in her muscles remained. The fight was not fully over. The valley held remnants of a defeated enemy, and every second mattered. Around her, soldiers were emerging from cover, cautious but determined. The platoon, once scattered and demoralized, now moved with a newfound cohesion, each member aware of the quiet force that had held them together. Emily Carter. She moved swiftly between wounded soldiers, assessing injuries, cleaning blood, and applying tourniquets with the precision of a surgeon. Every motion was deliberate, practiced, and infused with a calm authority that reassured the shaken troops. Private Daniels, the young recruit who had been paralyzed with fear earlier, followed her instructions without hesitation, his confidence restored by her presence. Captain Daniel Reeves lay nearby, stabilized but still weak from his wounds. Emily knelt beside him, carefully adjusting the bandages that had saved his life during the firefight. "You held on," she said softly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion gnawing at her. He gave a faint, pained smile, eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved us all," he rasped. Emily shook her head slightly, focusing on securing M4 and checking his vitals. "We all made it through," she said simply. "That's what matters." Even as she worked, Emily's mind cataloged every detail of the ambush, the enemy positions, the paths they had taken, the moments when her actions had turned the tide. Each detail could save lives in future operations. Her training had prepared her to act under extreme pressure, But nothing could truly prepare a soldier for the simultaneous chaos of a battlefield and the responsibility of tending to the critically wounded. Yet she managed both with remarkable skill, seamlessly transitioning from warrior to healer in the same heartbeat. Nearby, soldiers began coordinating the wounded and preparing them for evacuation. Emily oversaw the process, ensuring that the most critically injured were prioritized. She directed them to clear debris from paths, helped stabilize litters, and continued to administer care where it was needed. Each action reinforced her quiet leadership, her ability to inspire and organize under the most harrowing circumstances. Her presence was magnetic, drawing the platoon together in a way that transcended rank or previous hierarchy. She was no longer just the medic. She had become the linchpin of their survival. The medevac helicopters arrived moments later, their rotors chopping the air with deafening precision. Dust and debris swirled around the landing zone, reducing visibility and adding another layer of danger. Emily coordinated with the flight crew, directing the soldiers as they loaded the wounded into the choppers. Her calm authority ensured that the process remained orderly, even under the relentless pressure of the environment. She lifted Reeves into the helicopter herself, supporting his weight and ensuring he was secured for flight. The relief in his eyes mirrored the gratitude of every soldier she had saved. Once the wounded were safely aboard the helicopters, Emily remained behind, checking on the remaining soldiers, ensuring that no one had been overlooked. Her uniform was tattered, streaked with blood and dust, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused entirely on the lives in front of her, the ones she could still protect. She moved quickly, methodically, stabilizing minor injuries, giving reassurance, and directing the platoon to safer positions. Her actions were a testament to her resilience, her skill, and her unwavering commitment to others. As the helicopters lifted off, Emily finally allowed herself a moment to survey the valley. The battlefield was a scene of devastation, smoke rising from vehicles, the ground scarred by explosions, the remnants of the enemy scattered across the ridges. Yet amidst the destruction, there was life. Her soldiers had survived. Captain Reeves had survived. The platoon, once on the brink of annihilation, now stood together, stronger and more cohesive than ever. Emily's actions had not only preserved lives, but had transformed the outcome of the ambush entirely. Word of her courage and composure spread quickly through the platoon. Soldiers whispered about the medic who had saved her commander and held the line against overwhelming odds. Private Daniels, who had been paralyzed with fear at the start, spoke of her leadership with awe. Others recounted how her precise firing and strategic directives had changed the trajectory of the battle. Emily did not seek recognition. She had acted out of necessity, out of a commitment to her duty and to the lives of those around her. Yet the impact of her actions was undeniable. Back at the forward operating base, Emily continued her work tirelessly. She helped triage the injured, coordinated with incoming medics, and documented the events of the ambush with meticulous care. Soldiers approached her, expressing their gratitude, yet she remained humble. She knew the battle had been won, not by heroism alone, but by careful planning, coordination, and decisive action under pressure. Her quiet confidence inspired trust, and her steadfast presence reassured even the most shaken soldiers. Captain Reeves, recovering in the base's medical tent, requested to see Emily. When she arrived, he gave her a look of profound gratitude. "You did more than save me," he said softly. "You saved every one of us. I've never seen courage like that." Emily shook her head, her expression calm but resolute. "We all survived because we worked together," she replied. "That's the only reason any of us are here." Yet even she knew that the battle had revealed a side of her that few had ever seen, a courage that had pushed her beyond the traditional role of a medic. As the hours passed, Emily documented every detail of the ambush and her actions, both for official reports and for the benefit of her unit. She provided instructions for future patrols, noting enemy tactics, terrain challenges, and critical moments that could inform subsequent missions. Her careful attention to detail and her methodical approach reinforced her reputation as not only a skilled medic, but also a strategic thinker capable of acting decisively under extreme stress. By the end of the day, exhaustion finally began to weigh on Emily. Her uniform was torn, her body battered, and her hands sore from hours of administering care. Yet she remained quietly vigilant, ensuring the last of the wounded were stable and that the platoon was prepared for any residual threats. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the valley. Emily sat for a brief moment, looking out at the battlefield she had navigated and survived. She allowed herself a quiet breath, a fleeting moment of reflection. Even in that moment of relative calm, Emily understood the magnitude of what had transpired. The ambush had been devastating, the enemy skilled and ruthless, yet her quick thinking, calm presence, and unwavering courage had turned the tide. Lives had been saved, a platoon had survived, and Captain Reeves had been preserved from near-certain death. She had become more than a medic. She had become a symbol of bravery, precision, and leadership under fire. And while Emily Carter did not seek recognition, the story of her actions began to spread quietly among the soldiers at the base. Whispers of the medic who had taken up arms, directed fire, and saved her commander echoed in mess halls and tents. Her reputation grew with each retelling, her quiet courage inspiring admiration and respect. She remained humble, but the legend of her actions was beginning to take shape. A story of resilience, bravery, and unyielding dedication to life and duty. As night fell over Cooner Valley, Emily prepared to rest, though sleep would be fleeting. Her mind replayed the events of the day, cataloging, analyzing, and preparing for the next challenge. She had faced unimaginable danger, made impossible choices, and preserved the lives of those around her. The valley had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and she had emerged stronger, more capable, and undeniably heroic. In the quiet moments of the aftermath, Emily Carter understood one simple truth. Courage was not a single act. It was a series of decisions made under pressure, a willingness to step forward when others hesitated, and an unwavering commitment to protecting those who depended on you. She had made that choice again and again, and in doing so, had become a legend in her own right. The quiet medic who had saved lives, turned the tide of battle, and proved that heroism could take many forms. The story of Emily Carter's courage spread quickly through the ranks of the platoon. Soldiers who had witnessed the ambush and the chaos of Cooner Valley could not stop talking about the quiet medic who had stabilized the wounded, directed suppressive fire, and held the line with astonishing precision. In the dimly lit mess hall of the forward operating base, hushed conversations revolved around her actions. "Did you see her take out that sniper?" One private whispered. "She saved the captain and half of us," another replied. Emily herself, sitting quietly at a corner table with her med pack beside her, listened with a calm demeanor, her expression unreadable. She did not seek recognition, yet every whispered acknowledgement added to her growing legend. Captain Daniel Reeves, fully recovered now, approached her with a solemn expression. "Emily," he said, his voice tinged with awe, "you didn't just save lives today. You changed the course of the battle. I don't know how to thank you." Emily shook her head, brushing off the compliment. "I did what needed to be done," she replied softly. "That's all. We're alive because we stayed calm, stayed focused, and acted when it mattered. You gave me a chance to do my job." Reeves' eyes narrowed, filled with admiration and respect. "No, Emily, you went beyond your job. You became the anchor of this unit." Word of her heroism reached the commanding officers at the base. Soon, Emily was called to brief them on the ambush. providing detailed accounts of enemy positions, tactics, and the sequence of events that had unfolded. She recounted every moment with clarity and precision, highlighting both her medical interventions and the strategic decisions that had saved lives. The officers listened, impressed not only by her courage under fire, but also by her calm and methodical approach to leadership in a crisis. Reports were drafted, citations were recommended, and whispers of commendations began to circulate. Meanwhile, the platoon itself had begun to change. Emily's courage and composure became a model for soldiers of all ranks. The recruits who had laughed nervously and panicked under pressure now looked to her as a symbol of bravery and resourcefulness. Private Daniels, once timid and unsure, found a newfound confidence, often repeating her directives during training exercises, eager to emulate the calm precision she had displayed in the valley. Emily had inadvertently become a teacher, a leader, and an inspiration, shaping the next generation of soldiers by example. Emily's colleagues were awed not only by her courage, but by her humility. Despite the mounting recognition, she continued her work as a medic, tending to the wounded, documenting every injury, and ensuring that the platoon's needs were prioritized above her own. Her presence became a reassuring constant, a reminder that even in the most harrowing circumstances, professionalism and calm determination could turn the tide. Soldiers began to whisper her name not only with admiration, but with reverence. Emily Carter, the medic who saved the captain, the Valley Warrior. Recognition reached beyond the platoon. The base command arranged a formal ceremony to honor the acts of bravery that had emerged from the ambush. Emily, still quiet and unassuming, stood on the platform, flanked by Captain Reeves and the commanding officers. Her uniform was clean, pressed, but the faint traces of the battle, the slight scarring, the weariness in her eyes, hinted at the trials she had endured. One by one, officers recounted the details of her actions, how she had stabilized the wounded under fire, taken up the rifle when necessary, and coordinated the platoon's defense with calm precision. Every word painted her not only as a hero, but as a legend in the making. The commendation included the awarding of the Bronze Star with Valor, a recognition reserved for those who demonstrated extraordinary courage under fire. Emily accepted the medal quietly, her eyes scanning the platoon she had protected. She could feel their pride, their gratitude, and the weight of responsibility that came with such recognition. Yet she remained humble, deflecting attention to the unit as a whole. "This isn't about me," she said softly during the speech, her voice steady. "It's about every soldier who held the line, who followed orders, and who trusted each other. We survived together." News of Emily's actions soon traveled beyond the base. Reports circulated through military networks, highlighting the extraordinary circumstances under which a medic had taken decisive action in combat. Journalists and historians would later recount her story as a rare example of courage, quick thinking, and the blurred lines between traditional roles in the heat of battle. Emily's legend grew not because she sought fame, but because the truth of her heroism could not be ignored. She embodied the essence of bravery, skill, and selflessness that every soldier aspired to achieve. Yet for Emily, the accolades were secondary. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, she continued her work, tending to injuries, assisting with training, and ensuring the platoon was ready for future operations. The battlefield had taught her that courage was not a singular act. It was a constant, a series of decisions made under pressure, often without recognition or reward. She embraced this truth, knowing that her heroism lay not in medals or whispers, but in the lives she had preserved and the example she had set for those who would follow. Emily's presence became a symbol of possibility. Soldiers who had doubted themselves, who had feared the chaos of battle, now looked to her as proof that calm, skill, and courage could prevail even in the most dire situations. Recruits were taught about her actions during training, and veterans recounted her story to instill confidence and resilience in younger soldiers. The legend of Emily Carter grew with every retelling. A quiet hero whose bravery transcended the battlefield and inspired countless others to act decisively, to lead without hesitation, and to protect those in their charge. Even as the days turned into weeks, Emily remained grounded. She continued her work in the medical tent, coordinated patrols, and provided guidance to soldiers preparing for deployment. Yet whispers of her actions followed her, a constant reminder that her courage had not gone unnoticed. She had become a living legend within her unit, a figure whose calm determination and selfless bravery had altered the course of the ambush and preserved the lives of countless soldiers. And so, Emily Carter's story became more than just an account of heroism in the valley. It became a testament to the power of quiet courage, to the ability of one individual to change the course of events through skill, calm, and determination. Her actions, though rooted in necessity, had forged a legacy. Soldiers who witnessed her bravery would carry the lessons learned from her example for the rest of their careers. The legend of the medic who saved her commander, who took up a rifle and directed a platoon under fire, would live on, inspiring courage and resolve in every soldier who heard it. Emily herself never sought the title of legend, yet it followed her. Her humility, combined with her unparalleled courage and skill, made her story resonate deeply among those who valued honor, duty, and sacrifice. She had faced the abyss of war, made impossible decisions, and emerged not only as a survivor, but as a beacon of what human courage could achieve under the most extreme conditions. The valley had tested her, and she had not only survived, she had thrived, becoming a hero and a legend in the eyes of all who witnessed her extraordinary actions. Months had passed since the ambush in Cooner Valley, yet the echoes of that day continued to resonate throughout the platoon and beyond. Emily Carter's quiet courage had become a story retold around the base, in training facilities, and in halls, where soldiers gathered to reflect on heroism under fire. Her name was whispered with reverence, her actions dissected in tactical briefings, and her composure during chaos became the standard against which medics, soldiers, and officers measured courage. What had begun as a single act of survival had grown into a symbol of selflessness, precision, and bravery. Emily herself remained remarkably grounded. She continued her duties as a medic, tending to the sick and wounded, ensuring every soldier received care regardless of rank. She trained new recruits, demonstrating field techniques, triage procedures, and the calm mindset necessary for survival in hostile environments. Yet in these lessons, she never glorified her actions. Instead, she emphasized teamwork, preparation, and the necessity of making quick decisions under pressure. She insisted that heroism was not about medals or recognition. It was about protecting others and fulfilling one's duty, no matter the personal cost. News of Emily's deeds eventually reached higher command, and her story became part of official military reports. She received the Bronze Star with Valor, the Army Commendation Medal, and additional citations recognizing both her medical expertise and her extraordinary leadership under fire. During the formal awards ceremony, Emily stood on the stage, calm and composed, flanked by Captain Daniel Reeves and her fellow soldiers. She accepted the honors with humility, acknowledging the entire unit rather than herself. "We survived together," she said, her voice steady but imbued with quiet authority. Every life saved today was the result of teamwork, preparation, and courage. Her story spread beyond the military. Journalists and defense publications highlighted her remarkable combination of skill, courage, and calm under fire. Emily became a symbol of what one individual could achieve in extraordinary circumstances. She was invited to speak at military academies, leadership conferences, and public forums, sharing her experiences and the lessons she had learned. Yet she always maintained her humility, redirecting attention to the soldiers who had fought alongside her and the values that had guided them through the ambush: trust, precision, and unwavering focus. Emily's legend continued to grow within her unit. Private Daniels, now a confident and capable soldier, often recounted her actions to younger recruits. He described how she had stabilized the captain, taken up the rifle, and orchestrated the defense of the platoon with a combination of tactical brilliance and medical expertise. Her example inspired countless soldiers to emulate her composure and decisiveness. Each retelling reinforced the notion that courage could manifest in many forms, not only through aggression, but through protection, leadership, and the steadfast commitment to life itself. Even beyond the immediate military community, Emily's story began to resonate with civilians and historians alike. Her actions became a case study in crisis leadership, tactical innovation, and ethical decision-making under extreme conditions. Scholars analyzed the ambush and her response, highlighting how her calm, methodical approach had turned a potentially catastrophic situation into a successful defensive maneuver. Emily's ability to bridge the roles of medic and tactical leader became a model for training, illustrating the power of adaptability, skill, and decisive action. Back at the base, Emily remained approachable and grounded despite her growing recognition. Soldiers often sought her advice, not only on medical procedures, but on leadership and decision-making in high-pressure environments. She mentored them, quietly offering guidance with patience and empathy, always emphasizing that the measure of a hero was not in accolades, but in the lives they touched and the choices they made in the most difficult moments. Her humility, combined with her courage, made her legend all the more inspiring. The story of the Cooner Valley ambush and Emily Carter's role within it eventually reached the Department of Defense, military historians, and training divisions across the United States. Her example was incorporated into training manuals, emphasizing the critical importance of adaptability, calmness under fire, and the integration of medical expertise with tactical decision-making. Emily's actions provided a rare and compelling blueprint for leadership in extreme conditions, demonstrating how one individual could influence the survival and cohesion of an entire unit. Years later, Emily's impact continued to be felt. Soldiers who had been part of the ambush and younger recruits who had learned her story carried her lessons forward. The platoon she had saved went on to complete missions with increased cohesion, confidence, and resilience. Emily's legacy became not just a story of bravery in one battle, but a long-lasting influence on a culture of teamwork, responsibility, and courage within the military. Her quiet determination and precise actions became part of the ethos of the unit, an enduring example of what it meant to lead under fire. Emily herself eventually reflected on her journey with humility. She had gone to Cooner Valley as a medic, trained to save lives in the conventional sense, yet circumstances had demanded that she expand her role, take up the rifle, and direct her fellow soldiers under fire. She had acted decisively, balancing care with combat, leadership with protection. In the end, she had preserved lives, ensured the survival of her unit, and demonstrated that courage could take many forms. She had become a living embodiment of heroism, not through ego or desire for recognition, but through action, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to others. Even as her name became known in military circles, and her story traveled far beyond, Emily remained the same quiet, dedicated medic. She continued her work tirelessly, mentoring others, refining her skills, and ensuring that the principles that had guided her in Cooner Valley were instilled in every soldier who trained under her watch. Her legend was not built on self-promotion, but on the tangible impact of her actions, on the lives she saved, the battles she influenced, and the example she set for countless others. In the final reflection of her journey, Emily Carter's story exemplified the essence of heroism. She had faced overwhelming danger, made impossible decisions, and emerged as a beacon of courage and skill. She had turned a near-catastrophic ambush into a story of survival and leadership. Her name would be remembered, not merely for medals or commendations, but for the living testament of bravery, humility, and resilience she embodied. The quiet medic had become a legend, a symbol of courage that transcended the battlefield and inspired generations to come. And so, the legacy of Emily Carter endured. The medic who saved her commander in a firefight, took up a rifle to protect her platoon, and became a living legend. Her actions were proof that heroism could manifest in moments of extreme adversity. That courage was not always loud, but always impactful, and that one person's resolve could change the course of events for many. In the annals of military history, her story remained a testament to the power of selflessness, precision, and unwavering bravery.